All right, today we're talking freeze-dried foods, and before I get into some of these freeze-dried food options, I want to take a second and thank the Inquisitive Farm Wife for collaborating as part of Freeze-Dried February 2024. This is our second year in a row to do Freeze-Dried February, and there's actually a big giveaway, and I want to talk about some of the contributors to the giveaway at the end, but we'll get to that once we've kind of gone through a few of the things here. But we're going to talk about freeze-dried foods, advantages, disadvantages, what is freeze drying, and what are some of the alternatives. So want to jump into that here. We've got quite a few options for freeze-dried foods. But what is it? What is freeze-drying food? What's the process mean to have freeze-dried food versus dehydrated or some of the stuff boiled in a bag? When we look at some of the alternatives, there's some things that have similar qualities, less price, different process. And for me, when it comes to food preservation, it's more about the destination than the journey. I'm not so worried about how it's preservative. It's what's the end product, right? What do you get at the end? So freeze drying is a type of food preservation technology based on drying certain materials by sublimating the moisture they contain. It consists of freezing the product, then removing the ice by sublimation and heating it under vacuum conditions. This prevents the water containing the food from entering the liquid phase. So essentially what they're doing in a freeze dryer is you freeze dry the food, turns all the water into ice, and then they extract the ice. They extract that water from the food, and the end result is food with a very low moisture content. And removing the moisture from the food has a lot of advantages. One specifically is it dramatically extends the shelf life, right? And we'll get into the list of advantages, as freeze drying can extract more than 95% of the water. So you're taking out all that water, and it's the water that actually is what encourages things like bacteria growth, right? In order to preserve food, you have to make sure it doesn't spoil, doesn't have bacteria and whatnot growing, doesn't become inedible, right? So there's actually historical precedence behind freeze drying, which I found kind of interesting. So back in the day, freeze drying process originated in the Incan Empire, which Incans was a long time ago, located in the Andean highlands at an altitude of 4,000 meters. The settlers produced what was called a chuno and continued to do so as a result of dehydration of potatoes. So the technique consisted of leaving the harvested potatoes on the ground, freeze dry at night at the very low temperatures. While during the day, the sunlight and dry winds create the necessary conditions for the changes in state to occur. Water changes from solid state to a gaseous state without a liquid phase. So in those mountains at 4,000 degrees, you could actually just put food out. They'd put potatoes out. It would freeze, and then the dryness and the wind of the next day would extract the water. So it was like free freeze drying. Many centuries ago, the ancient Incans had their own natural conditions that would result in freeze-dried food, and maybe that somehow contributed, don't know, to the process of freeze-drying today. So freeze-drying, we've got examples here of freeze-drying foods. You've got your classic number 10 can of freeze-dried food. You can get these on Amazon. This was from beprepared.com. We've got a couple different brands here, Emergency Essentials, August and Farms. There's a few different brands that do the big bulk number 10 cans. So get them on Amazon, get them online. A lot of different options. We got a few of them here. You got cheese powder, potato shreds, butter powder, peanut butter powder. These were actually from last year. So you've got your freeze-dried sausages here. So we just repackaged it after we cooked them up. We made some sausage biscuits using all freeze-dried, and they were good, and that's one of the advantages, right? You got freeze-dried cheese. Once again, we put our recipe on top. You just add water. So the advantage of freeze-dried foods is that they're simple, right? You take it out, you add water, and it's back to the normal state, and it maintains its freshness, maintains its texture, maintains all the nutritional value, right? So you've sort of kind of put the food in a state of suspended animation, as it were, by removing the water, right? You can come back later, add the water back in. Another example, this is more just your grocery store. We pick these up freeze-dried strawberry fruit crisps, and it's freeze-dried strawberries. The ingredients here is strawberries, so just freeze-dried strawberries, right? Kind of standard retail. So you get freeze-dried stuff everywhere. This is also a very popular form of freeze-dried food. You've got Mountain House, Peak Performance, a lot of companies make these. I was down at Academy Sports, and they've got the buckets. You can get kind of the survival buckets of freeze-dried food. Thought about getting one just to have here, show you guys, but the line wasn't worth it, honestly. I don't know what was going on, some kind of a discount sale. The line was out the door, so I did not do that. But this is an example, right? These are just standard freeze-dried meals. You get this Academy Sports, you get this Walmart, $10 or more. I've seen them go up to $12, 2 servings per container, 440 calories per container. So it's just a meal, right? Individual freeze-dried meals. So freeze-dried foods come in a lot of shapes, sizes. You get them different places, kind of sprinkled around, right? And as I said, the advantage of freeze-dried inhibits the growth of pathogenic microorganisms, maintains nutritional and sensory properties of the food. As I said, when we made the sausage biscuits using the freeze-dried sausage, after you rehydrate it and cook it, it was just sausage, right? It doesn't ruin the foods, right? You don't come in saying, oh, this was freeze-dried. It was actually pretty good. When we were all said and done, it was actually pretty good. So it maintains the shape, the size, convenient food storage, transport, and distribution, as it significantly reduces weight. And I'm going to get into that with the freeze-dried strawberry about how much it actually reduces the weight. Allows rehydration to restore the food's organoleptic properties and weight, shelf stable. So generally, when you're looking at freeze-dried foods, most of these, you're talking 20-year, 30-year shelf life. It depends on what it is, where you got it from and whatnot. But for example, this lasagna with meat sauce is good until 2053, which is quite a long time from now. And that's what you're buying. You're buying food that's preserved, going to maintain its freshness, its texture, its flavor for a very long time. But you are paying a premium for that, and we'll get into that. So shelf stable, right? You've got sausage here, shelf stable, good for 10, 20 plus years, right? Good for a long time, but it is sausage, even though it's all dried up little chunks of sausage. Throw a little water in there and it's ready to go. So how much water do you take out, right? And we talk about this in our Prepper Pantry series. Just did a video filmed out about the weight, right? Weight can be an issue when you've got to carry food. If you're camping, if you're hiking, if you're walking long distances, weight is an issue, and that's an advantage with freeze-dried. So on the strawberries, so we did a video on this. So 10 pounds of fresh strawberries gets you to 1,500 calories. So if you wanted to look at a 1,500 calorie diet as a point of comparison, you would have to eat 10 pounds of fresh strawberries to get 1,500 calories. If you look at the freeze-dried, which it says the only ingredient here is strawberries, I'm going to believe them, look at the nutritional information, how much the package weighs, you would only need 13 ounces of freeze-dried strawberries to get to 1,500 calories. So you're going from 10 pounds to 13 ounces, which is a couple ounces less than a pound. That's a huge difference. If you've got to carry the food with you, if you're worried about shelf space and storage, certainly this box has got little packets in it, but end of the day, that's a lot less than 10 pounds of strawberries, has a significantly reduced shelf life. Significantly increased shelf life. They're just little packets, right? They don't weigh anything, just little packets of strawberries. So if you like strawberries and you want to preserve them, because fresh ones don't last very long, throw them in the freeze dryer. They take up much less weight, much less space. So those are kind of the advantages, right, of freeze dried. Now, there's some disadvantages and there's some alternatives, and I want to kind of talk through the disadvantages. So number one is the cost to buy. You can get a nice dehydrator high end for a couple $100 or less, depending on what you like, what you want to spend, how big the dehydrator is. And dehydrating foods, which we'll get into dehydrated foods a little bit, does extend the shelf life, right? That's one of the category alternatives we'll look at. If you want to buy a freeze dryer, if you don't want to just buy freeze dried foods and you want to do that at home, make your own freeze dried Skittles, It's the costs, right? A small unit, and I looked it up today, small harvest right freeze dryer is going to run you about $2,400, and it goes up from there, right? You want a nicer pump, you want a bigger unit, it's $2,400. So all the rest of the math I'm going to talk about is based on that $2,400. That's upfront, $2,400 just to get the unit, right? Empty unit, no food, you don't get $2,400 worth of food, you just get the unit, $2,400, and that's a lot. That's a lot of money to put out. That's the barrier to entry. And if you're not worried about that, if you're like, hey, no big deal, then great. You get your $2,400 and you have fun freeze drying. It's all in what your goal is, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. The second side is the cost to run a freeze dryer. So I started to work out the math based on watts. The watts they say are, how many amps times volt gets you watts. I was starting to run the math on it, and I found a website where someone already did it. So I'm going to use their math. It was on commonsensehome.com, Harvest Right Freeze Dryer, right? They already did the math. So my question was, how much electricity does a freeze dryer use, and how much does that cost? Because it's not nothing, right? It's more than nothing. So freezing cycle, and this is based on that article, the freezing cycle, so there's three cycles the freeze dryer runs. It's a freezing cycle, a drying cycle, and then a final drying cycle. So this is based on the article. So a freezing cycle uses 3 kilowatt hours of energy for the factory default 9-hour freezing cycle. So just the first step is 3 kilowatt hours. Drying cycle runs for 10 hours. The dryer would use about 7.25 kilowatt hours. And then the 7-hour factory final drying cycle uses approximately 5 kilowatt hours of electricity, and that's the amount of electricity for one batch, right? You put your strawberries in there, you set it up. When it's done, it's 18 hours later, and that's one of the disadvantages. Time you use 21 kilowatt hours. Now, in the article, he said that 21 kilowatt hours to run one batch costs you $1.90. I don't know how old the article is, but I did a quick search. The average cost of electricity in the United States is 16.21 cents per kilowatt hour. So at 16.21 cents per kilowatt hour, the 18 hours of running the freeze dryer is going to cost you $3.40. So on top of the $2,400 to buy the unit, every time you run a batch, these things require so much electricity. That's $3.40 just in electricity. And of course, in order to make freeze-dried strawberries, to make this 1.56 ounce, or what do we say, about 13 ounces freeze-dried strawberries, you need 10 pounds of strawberries. Now, if you grow them yourself, you might say, well, that's not really a cost. I don't care how much the machine costs. I like my freeze-dried strawberries. I want to eat my freeze-dried Skittles. And if that's your situation, that's fine, right? I'm not telling you not to get one. I'm not telling you how to live your life. But if you're looking at cost, if your thing is on cost, if you think I'm going to save money on a freeze dryer, then we probably want to talk through it, right? Have that conversation. So one is the cost of the unit, $2,400 minimum, and then the cost to run the unit, $3.40 each batch. And then there's time, 18 hours standard. So you look at 18 hours to run a batch, right? $24 for the unit. So I don't want to get on that too much. So what are some of the alternatives, as we've said, to buying the unit and making it yourself? And that's what we're going to talk about. Alternatives. If your goal is simply, I want to have food security, I want to build out my pantry, and I think freeze-dried foods have a place in that pantry, so I'm just going to buy a unit and freeze-dry it myself, you might want to look at the math first, right? Look at the alternative. So what if you just wanted to take the $2,400 and buy Mountain House Adventure Meals, lasagna with meat sauce, right? So for $2,400, so the pouch of freeze-dried lasagna was $11.47 for 440 calories, which for $2,400 you could get 209 pouches. So you'd have 209 two-serving pouches for $2,400. That's a total of 91,960 calories, and that works out to about 46 days of food at 2,000 calories, which is $52 per 2,000 calorie day. So freeze-dried is expensive, and maybe that's why people get the unit. You could save money over time, right? As we already said, just $2,400 would get you all of 46 days worth of freeze-dried food, which is not a lot of freeze-dried food. talking $52 per day for lasagna. If you want to live on lasagna, that was my math, because this is only 440, so you're going to need quite a few of these pouches. So it is expensive, right? But you could just go out and buy it. Take your 2,400 bucks, just go buy freeze-dried food, and you're done. Yes, right, you're going to get some. For this case, you get about 46 days worth of food. So let's look at some other alternatives I want to pull up here. I'm going to pause and kind of reset. So let me pause, reset, and we'll jump back in and look at some of the other alternatives. All right, so I'm going to look at our next option, right? We talked about freeze-dried lasagna, or just buying a bunch of freeze-dried food as opposed to buying a freeze dryer. The next option we have would be MREs. Once again, if your goal is food security, building out a long-term food pantry more than it is just having a freeze dried or freeze dry stuff, and if that's your option, absolutely go for it. But if we say, hey, we got $2,400, what can we do with that beyond just buying the freeze dryer to get us that food security? And a freeze dryer certainly could be part of that. So these are XMREs. These are kind of a standard idea, whether it's an MRE or an XMRE in terms of long-term food storage, right? These extended shelf life. And I, for some reason, always thought MREs were freeze dried, but I looked it up and they're not. They actually boil the food in the package to cook it. So it's sealed and boiled. It's not actually freeze dried. Didn't realize that. For some reason, never occurred to me. So they're not freeze dried. They're sealed and boiled. They do have a long shelf life, whether it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. It's all in who you talk to. Some of them say they last a very long time. But so this was $199 for a case of 12, right? Case of 12. They say they got 1,300 calories each, right? So this entire case of 12 units gets you 15,600 calories for the case. So if you just spent $2,400, so I'm not going to get the freeze dryer, I just want to buy these XMREs, you could get 12 cases of XMREs for $2,400, which would give you a total of 187,200 calories worth of MREs, which works out to 93 days at 2,000 calories, which is about $25 per day, per 2,000 calorie day. So XMREs are not cheap. They have some of the same characteristics of what you might call your freeze-dried meals, in that it's a meal, it's packed, it's ready to go, sort of just add water, though you don't really have to just add water to the MREs, but it's just packed and ready, good shelf life, ready to go. So that's the MRE option. Once again, if you just wanted to buy MREs, you get 12 cases, and I know you can get them for less. This is the Amazon price on the XMRE. I know there's military surplus places. People tell me about them. You get MREs for $5 each. So I'm just going off the XMRE, brand new, ready to go in the box for maximum shelf life. So next thing I want to look at is the LDS dehydrated foods as an alternative option. So I'll be right back. All right, so what about dehydrated? And as I mentioned, you can get a dehydrator for a couple $100, as I said, compared to a freeze dryer for $2,400. And where I'm going with this here is the idea: if you have $2,400 to spend on building out your long-term food storage pantry, rather than buying a freeze dryer and then freeze drying food, what could you get? What could you just get? Call it one and done, right? What do you get with $2,400 and be done? We did a big LDS haul not too long ago. Picked up cans, number 10 cans from LDS store, all Desert Farms brand. This is a case of spaghetti bites. This is just the onions. What I was surprised is these are dehydrated, right? Dehydrated onions, but the storage life estimate's 30 years. So it's the same shelf life you would expect from freeze-dried, but they're actually dehydrated. So I don't care the process they use, whether they froze dried it, or freeze-dried it, or they dehydrated it, right? In the end, you've got your 30-year shelf life, dehydrated diced. You got a case of spaghetti bites. And when you look at things like your dry milk, that's not freeze-dried, that's dehydrated. So dehydration is certainly an option, and it can yield the high-end shelf life. So back to the $2,400. If you've got $2,400 to spend, how much dehydrated spaghetti bites can you get, right? Once again, we're saying I'm just going to stock my pantry. What are your options? So the spaghetti bites have 30-year shelf life. So it's $36 price today for a case of 6 number 10 cans. That's the onions. We got spaghetti bites. So it's 22 servings per can and 210 calories per serving, which gives you a total of 4,620 calories per can per $6 can. So if you got, which works out $2.60 incidentally, $2.60 per 2,000 calorie day, or 27,720 calories per case. So if you just took $2,400 to the LDS store, you could get 68 cases or 66 cases of 6 cans. That's not a good number, for $2,400, which would yield a total of 1,829,520 calories. That's a lot of calories. Actually works out to 914 days of food at 2,000 calories a day, or 2.5 years for $2,400. So if you're just going for how much food can I get in the pantry, I got $2,400, you can get 2.5 years worth of spaghetti bites for that $2,400. Call it done, right? And that's not even the cheapest, right? You might say, great, I don't like spaghetti bites, I don't want to dehydrate. 2.5 years isn't enough, right? If we're putting in $2,400, we want more than 2.5 years. So I'll show you. We'll go on to the next one of just standard dry goods. So stick with me and we'll change the setup. All right, so now we're prepping. Right now we're going full prepper here. I got my pinto beans in the Mylar bag, oxygen absorber sealed, ready to go. We got a 5-gallon bucket with our pinto beans all stacked in Mylar bag, all nice and ready to go. So beans like this, you could say unlimited shelf life, you could say 25-year shelf life. If stored properly, lasts a very long time and maintains its nutritional value, just like the freeze-dried foods. Now, it's not going to taste like nice fancy lasagna, but if we're talking about calories, if we're talking about food security, what do you get? What does $2,400 get you worth of beans? So I did the math on that. So you can get a 50-pound bag of beans at Sam's Club right now for $34.98. So $2,400 would get you 68 50-pound bags, or 3,400 pounds of beans, of pinto beans. So that works out to about $1.30 per 2,000 calorie day, or 51,840 calories per bag. So we've got our 68 50-pound bags, 3,400 pounds of beans, equals 3,525,120 total calories, or 1,762 2,000 calorie days, or 4.8 years worth of food for $2,400. So if you have $2,400 and you're just trying to get food security, you want to have calories stashed away, if you have room for 3,400 pounds of beans, that's what you can get for $2,400. Which is 4.8 years. That's a lot of food stashed away. That's still 1.2 years for 4 people. So $2,400, you take it to the bean store, you get a couple trucks, you bring it all home. If you got a place to stash it, well, you got that problem with any of these bulk foods, right, where you're going to store it. That's some food security right there. $2,400 worth of beans, that's 4.8 years, right? That's going to last you a long time. Probably take the rest of your life or 2 lifetimes to eat that many beans. But it's there. You have food security. Now, if you're thinking, no, not good enough, I need more than 4.8 years for my $2,400, we got you. So I'm going to set up one more time. All right, so this is the hard red wheat, or we call it wheat berries, we got at the LDS store. 25-year shelf life, more or less, that's what they say. So once again, if you take your $2,400 and you're just going for max calories, I think this is it. I think this is max calories, and I'll explain why. So 25-year shelf life, plus or minus, it's about $18.81 for a 25-pound bag of wheat berries. You get 263 servings per bag, 140 calories per serving, which gets you 36,820 calories per bag, per 25-pound bag. At 2,000 calories a day, that's 18.4 days of food, so it works out to about $1.02 per 2,000 calorie day. So if you're going with $2,400, you could get 127 25-pound bags, or 3,175 pounds of wheat berries, which works out to 4,676,140 calories. or 2,338 2,000 calorie days, 6.4 years worth of food for $2,400. So if you want the most bang for your buck in terms of food storage, get your red wheat. You could have 6.4 years worth of food. So once again, going back to, I'm not trying to tell anybody not to get a freeze dryer, and I know I've had this conversation with a few people that have freeze dryers and love freeze dryers, and that's great. If you eat a lot of freeze dried food, this is perfect, right? You go camping, and that's usually what they say. I go camping all the time. I use freeze-dried food all the time. Or, I've talked to some friends like, I want to get the freeze dryer to make freeze-dried candy and sell it, right? And maybe you can sell it and make a profit. Maybe you just like preserving the stuff you grow, right? You've got in your garden, you want to preserve things. That's perfect too. But if the idea is simply, I want food security, you get your red wheat, spend your $2,400, you can get 6 years worth of food, as opposed to you get the freeze dryer, stack them side by side. You've still got to buy the food or grow the food to actually freeze dry, and then you're paying a couple bucks every time you run it. So I hope that helps out. Let me jump in now, right? Once again, we're thanking Angela, the Acquisitive Farm Wife, the host of the Freeze Dried February. There is a giveaway. We mentioned the big giveaway here, the grand giveaway, March 6th at 6 p.m. Central Time. Hashtag Freeze Dried February. So in order to qualify for the giveaway for the prizes, viewers get chances to win these prizes by making genuine comments on our videos. So there's a bunch of people doing freeze-dried February videos. If they're part of the collaboration, you make a comment like on this video or any of those videos, make a genuine comment, use the hashtag. They're going to do a random drawing, right? And you have to be present, I believe, at the giveaway, right, at the grand prize giveaway, March 6th, 6 p.m. on Inquisitive Farm Wife's channel, for a chance to win, right? And I'll talk about what the prizes are. So hosted by Inquisitive Farm Wife, 5 live giveaways and prizes. So check out her channel for that information. So we want to thank Harvest Right. We want to thank 4 Jars. We want to thank Brian at Live Life Simply. His channel's a great resource for people interested in freeze drying. Of course, a lot of other great content providers here. So the prizes this time, it looks like the top prize, if you win it, is a $500 gift card to Harvest Right, or 50% off the price of a freeze dryer. And there's a lot of other great prizes in there as well. Super exciting. I said you've got to do the hashtag Freeze Dried February, find the other channels, watch the videos, make comments, and then show up at the giveaways. Check out Angela's channel for more information. So as always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.